But let me give you an example of something that I think is rational as far as we can, but it's not amenable so easy to the scientific method. So let's say, for example, this is an experience I've gone through not so long ago, I want to get married. Right? So a truly irrational thing would be to go onto the street and grab the first and best woman and say, marry me. And if she says yes, that's even more irrational. So what Mary and I did is we got to know each other, we spent time to see whether we actually enjoyed being together, that's helpful. We got counsel from friends that we trusted and asked them what they think about us together. We did these little tests, these compatibility tests, which are quite revealing and sometimes a little bit tough, I should say. Well, it's lists about what you like and don't like the other person and about life, these kinds of things. All of these things are very useful and helpful. But at the end of the day, if I would have demanded scientific certainty that Mary was the right person to be married, I would still be probably in the situation of my earlier comic about scientists not having girlfriends, because I can never know for sure whether she would be the right person for me. Moreover, I try to apply the scientific method and do repeatable experiments. Marriage is not necessarily always that good of an idea. What I have to do is to take a kind of step of faith. I have to step of faith and say, yes, I will get married, because there are aspects of being married that I can't know. There's aspects of knowledge, personal knowledge, that's not accessible to me until I am married. I'm very happy I made that decision, and I think it was great. But there are lots of things about being married that I didn't know before I was, and I couldn't have known. So in many ways, that really, really important life decision is not amenable entirely to the scientific method. Science can help, perhaps. But by and large, I think, like many other important decisions in life, the scientific method is too weak, too poor, too impoverished for that. I think that to look at something like what Peter Atkins said, the idea that science is the only way of achieving truth. I think it's a little bit like an analogy that the philosopher Alvin Pentaga made that I find helpful. He said it's a little bit like the drunk who's found looking for his keys under a lamppost. And he's asked, why are you looking for your keys here? He said, well, I lost my keys. And where'd you lose them? Well, I think I lost them somewhere down the street. But why are you looking here? Well, it's because the light here is I can see better. And so Pentaga says, well, it's not only like that, it's even more. It's saying that it's wrong to look anywhere else except under the lamppost for your keys, because they can't possibly be anywhere else. And I think that's basically the idea, if the scientistic idea that science is the only way of achieving relevant knowledge of the world. It's a little bit like looking for your keys only under the lamppost, because that's where it's easiest to see. So another example of things that I think are difficult to really extract from science are questions of value. So let's say I wanted to ask what's the value of a human life? I could be a chemist and I could try to add up all the elements that are inside of you, and if you had a lot of gold crowns in your teeth, you'd be worth more than somebody who had less. I could be a physiologist, I could try to measure perhaps the size of your brain. Maybe that's how coherent is coherent with how valuable you are. If I was a psychologist, I could look at how smart you are, or how resilient you are, or how loving you are, whatever other metric I wanted to use. Anthropologist, I could ask myself, well, how much does the community value you? Maybe that's a way of measuring your value. Or an economist, I could ask how much economic value do you contribute to the people around you. I think all of us feel instinctively that those ways of valuing people, although they're very interesting ways of measuring people, they don't actually tell us why we have value. Why does a human life have value? Where do human rights come from? And I don't think that they can come really from these kinds of things, even though they are helpful. And that's not a new story, it's an old story. You often do find in literature people that will try to give a kind of scientific account of how things are, and then say this says something about how things ought to be. Very famously, David Hume, the skeptic philosopher, said, he was talking about this, driving an ought from an is, when all of a sudden I'm surprised to find that instead of the usual copulations of propositions, is and is not, I mean with no proposition that is not connected with an ought or an ought not. Or in a simpler way, what Hume is critiquing is what I sometimes call nothing buttery. So for example, humans are collections of chemicals, or are they nothing but collections of chemicals? That's the question. So let's say we'll go back to my relationship analogy. So let's say Mary and I are sitting in a beautiful restaurant, and the lights are low, and there's flowers on the table, there's candles, and at some point she says to me, okay, I know we've been going out for a little while, but I want to know, how well do you really know who I am? And those of you who've been in these situations know that this is a dangerous question. So my first strategy is distraction. Says, you look very nice tonight. Did you see that? But she keeps persisting, and I can't get away from it. And finally said, well, I think I know who you are. I know what you're made of. You're made of enough phosphorus for 2,000 matches, enough iron for 1 nail, enough chlorine to disinfect the swimming pool, and the average human enough fat for 10 bars of soap. And that's what I call nothing muchery, right? I just tell, I think we all see how silly it is. But it's true that, Mary's made of these things. But, that's a lot more than that. And so let me give you an example of what I call nothing muchery in practice. So here's my colleague Richard Dawkins talking about what makes us human. And he says, the individual organism is not exactly an illusion, it is too concrete for that, but it is a secondary derived phenomenon. And here he's talking about how things are, how something like our cells comes together from simpler units like genes. What he's really saying is it's not quite nothing but it is nothing, it is not much more than nothing but something that emerges when our genes come together. And the question is, that's kind of nothing muchery, and that's a kind of philosophical statement about who we are. And the question you want to ask is, can science really make these kinds of statements?
For more information about the Veritas Forum, including additional recordings and a calendar of upcoming events, please visit our website at veritas.org.